Welcome. My name is John Richards. I'm the director of the Miami Culinary Institute on one of our favorite weeks here downtown where we get to showcase all of the amazing things that we do. And the Miami Culinary Institute is pretty new to Miami. We've been open for about 18 months. Our students are now starting their second year. Our first graduates are happening in May. This is one of the rooms that we do many things with them. We will actually engage in international classroom discussions with other culinary schools around the world. We have many programs for the community. Go onto our website, sign up for a cooking class or a wine class. They're all on our website. Then we do a lot of professional development as well for some of our corporate partners. But today, we're here to learn how to fix our cake. Is that right?
Rolls and brownies, close.
I know it. Anne is known to millions of fans through her Cake Mix Doctor, the Chocolate Cake Doctor, and the Dinner Doctor cookbooks, which she's promoted in over 200 television appearances on Good Morning America, Roker on the Road, QVC, and many local stations. Her books are also favorite subjects for lifestyle editors and newspapers across the country. Anne lives in Nashville. I lived in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm a rock and roll musician that's played many, many years in Nashville as well. And has worked for a number of newspapers in the South, including Nashville, Tennessee's evening paper. While still in high school, you were food editor of the Atlanta Journal and the Atlanta Constitution. Also wrote for the Tennessean for 4 years. Without further ado, please welcome Anne Byrn.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here in Miami. What a beautiful facility. I'd like to say my kitchen at home looks like this, but it doesn't. And I do feel like around dinner time, though, I've got as many people as you do. I think through the years sort of watching me and waiting for dinner to be ready. Children and the dog, all in one place. But it's great to be here. I never thought that I would be here at a culinary school talking about gluten-free cooking. This has been an adventure that was totally recommended and begged by the readers. And I think I've some few repeats from the talk I gave this morning. So sorry if you hear the same old rerun. But I for years wrote cookbooks about cakes and about baking for busy families. And in about 2006, started getting emails from readers begging me to do more gluten-free. So at first, I kind of just put them off, thinking I'll get to that. I don't know anything about it. That's not my thing. To it just more and more. And there was one family in Washington State. It just tore my heart out. The mother not only had a daughter who was celiac, a son with Down syndrome, and a third child with some other developmental delays. And she just begged me. She said, "We cannot make a birthday cake gluten-free." So that's when, and then when I saw, Betty Crocker had a gluten-free cake mix just in my grocery store, I said, my gosh, it's out there. I mean, it's out there if one of the big manufacturers is making the product. So I wrote the first book, The Cake Mix Doctor Bakes Gluten-Free, recipes like the strawberry cake and my sister Susan's lemon cake and the darn good chocolate cake, and turned those all gluten-free. It wasn't easy because gluten-free cake mixes are based on rice flour. And rice flour in the kitchen is totally different than wheat flour. It is a lot heavier. It's denser. You go to make cakes and breads, it's heavy. Very, very heavy. So that's why when you pick up a package of a gluten-free cake mix, it's 15 or 16 ounces. It's heavy, and then you open it up, and you've just paid almost $6 for it, and you look in and go, I just paid it for that? I mean, it settles down to nothing, really. Very, very small. So that was the first book, was all about cakes and cookies. I went on tour with that book, and everybody loved it but wanted dinner. I mean, I thought, my one gluten-free, I was done with it, overdone. And they wanted dinner, and they wanted meatloaf, and they wanted a pie crust so they could make chicken pot pie. I had no idea, really. And then, interestingly, that was, I think, 2 years ago, just the difference, what 2 years makes. I had this book, new book, Unbelievably Gluten-Free, has just come out, and I really have not, I've only been to a handful of tourist cities. And already the crowds are larger and the people more diverse for their reason for being here. I mean, it's not just people who have celiac disease, which is when your body cannot metabolize gluten, but it is every kind of intolerance to gluten for all kinds of reasons. I mean, I've just everything from surgery. I was never this way until I went into surgery, to women with arthritis, men with high blood pressure, on and on and on. I am not gluten-free. So learning to cook this way was starting at the beginning. However, I was able to use a lot of the techniques that I know in cooking and put them to use. So that is what I'm giving you and readers through this book. I can't give you a personal story, but I can give you my years of cooking experience and me guessing on ingredients and questioning why and always doing things outside the box, which is sort of how I've lived my life, outside the box. I was the middle child. I was the child who just went her own path. And I think it has helped me in my writing because I tend to question box directions or package directions and want to do it my own way. We're going to make 2 recipes, those brownies, which are fabulous, saucepan brownie that's gluten-free, and then we're also going to make a yeast roll. So bear with me. This is the first time I have demoed the yeast roll. I would have never, thought I could write a book where I would put a yeast roll, a southern soft bread. Very difficult, I would think, without wheat flour. So we've got some, fortunately, that the pastry chef Jennifer prepped my dough for me ahead of time, which was very helpful. And I'm just going to kind of work with the dough, and we're going to pop it in the oven. And then as we cook, those rolls are going to bake, and you get to taste it hot. Because, I like bread hot from the oven. I know my mother always told me that I was going to get a terrible stomach ache if I kept eating her yeast bread hot from the oven. I didn't. No, she was wrong. Now, if I'd had a gluten intolerance or something, I probably would have had a horrible stomach ache. That's right. So I'm just going to, you can use parchment paper. You can use butter. This dough we're going to make in just a second, but I'm going to take this, and this is already actually risen. It's 1 rise. This is a lot easier than most gluten-free, most bread recipes. This is made with a gluten-free flour blend. The one I like the best is the gluten-free pantry. I will tell you that. It's in the green box. The pastry chef also recommended Thomas Keller's flour. I've forgotten the name of it. Thank you. Thank you. This is Bob's Red Mill. Bob's Red Mill, since we're all family here, we can talk brands. I think Bob's Red Mill's coarser on a lot of things. I think it's great for baking coarse things. I don't know if I would do it with rolls again. But you know what? You don't know that till you try the different brands out. This one it may have a little bit of the chickpea flour in it, which he tends to put in a lot of his products. So these have already risen. But what I'm doing is showing you how to shape them. You're going to make the dough, and then you're going to pinch off pieces of it, 2 tablespoon size pieces of this dough. And with a little oil on your hands, you're just going to shape into what's called a Parker house. And then I'll just let you finish doing that. Did we ever get the cinnamon? Is this the cinnamon? Oh, nice. One thing you can do with this dough, if you don't want to make just straight rolls, is to make cinnamon rolls. Little bit of about 5 tablespoons of granulated sugar mixed with about ½ teaspoon of cinnamon makes cinnamon sugar. Very easy. And by putting a little bit of that and making a pocket, so somebody's going to get the cinnamon roll. You can make easy cinnamon rolls. They bake up just like the others, and then you can even drizzle them with a little powdered sugar glaze when they come out of the oven. Okay, thank you. You're going to finish those up. All right, so let's make the dough. It starts with, and y'all may have to help me with this big old mixer guy. My KitchenAid is a little bit smaller. Okay. This is the Bob's Red Mill flour blend. You use about 16 ounces. I think in gluten-free cooking and baking, it really helps to have a kitchen scale. I really recommend you get a kitchen scale. I use them all the time. I started making cakes and making sure that my layers were exactly the same size. When you pour in the batter into a layer pan, I can place that layer pan full of batter right on the kitchen scale and know exactly what it weighs. So each one, if that's has been an issue before. But 16 ounces, because also all the sizes of the packaging for gluten-free flour blends are different. So for this recipe, you'll need 16 ounces, which is around 3 1/4 cups, but it helps if you can just weigh it out. A little bit of salt, and then 1 packet of the Rapid Rise dry yeast. Thank you. And then we're going to turn this gallon low. Thank you. The reason I'm asking for help, I have been on television. I've been on live television where I have totally screwed up the KitchenAid. I've had batter go into my face, chocolate cake batter. And this is a dry, this will come into my face. Okay. All right, help me here. Thank you. And that just goes on low. Just to combine. Would you mind putting that over there? Thank you. All right, meanwhile, we've got a bowl. And we're going to make our liquid ingredient blend that starts with vegetable oil. It's about 6 tablespoons of vegetable oil. All pre-measured. I highly recommend you get a team of chefs to come in your kitchen and pre-measure all of your ingredients. It really helps speed cooking along the line. A little bit of vinegar. Got some honey. Cute. About 2 tablespoons of honey. That's the sweetener. Should be 1 more. That's right. All right, and the eggs. 2 eggs. Thank you. How's it going over there? Good. I think the Bob's Red Mill is definitely a little heavier and more crumbly than the gluten-free pantry. I'll just give you that heads up that I would really, I really recommend it. All right, so just your eggs, honey, vinegar, and oil. I smell the cinnamon though, it's nice. Just whisk those together, and then I've got some milk that's been warmed. It's good. It should be warm to the touch just by taking the chill off of refrigerated milk, especially the Rapid Rise yeast. Needs a little bit higher temperature than your normal feel to it. So it needs to be a little bit warmer to get it going. You know, it's kind of like the yeast that doesn't want to get out of the bed in the morning. So you got to get it, help get it going. For some weird reason, and maybe somebody in the audience knows the reason, you have to beat gluten-free doughs that are based on rice flour a lot. That's where a KitchenAid helps, a food processor. Yeah, we're going to put these rolls in at about 400 degrees for about 12 to 14 minutes. Thank you. So, they go into, well, 375, is that convection? Yeah. 375 convection or 400 conventional. It's the same. Yeah. But let's check them at 10 minutes. Okay. So it's about 3 minutes on medium-high. Yes?
How much milk and how much vinegar?
Just a little bit of vinegar. It's about 1 teaspoon. And the milk is a cup, 1 cup of warm milk. Uh-huh. How many people here are already baking gluten-free? You're working with doughs and crusts. Okay. All right. Do you find that, and did you bake before? Did you bake? Yes, before. You did. Okay. Is it me, or are all the doughs, like bread dough, pie crust, everything is so much wetter as gluten-free? Yeah. Because you don't have wheat flour to absorb the liquid. you got a lot of liquid. What I found works is to keep a little vegetable oil or something there that I can just keep my fingertips oiled so that you can work with the dough, because it's not going to be like working with wheat flour where after you work the bread dough enough it gets to the it's soft like a baby's bottom. That's what we used to say. If you work the dough long enough and develop the gluten and everything, it's soft, and then you don't need to put oil on your hands. You have to. In the book, I have a recipe for pie crust that I never thought we would, be able to come up with that recipe, but we did. And the miracle ingredient, as I mentioned earlier, was cream cheese. And when you add cream cheese to the pie crust dough, it becomes like Play-Doh. And then you just put a ball of it in your pie pan and then just press it out with the palm of your hand, and you can work with it. So it's a challenge. There's no doubt a challenge, but I think it's challenges that you can solve yourself by looking at ways to work with it and knowing that it's not going to be the same as it was before. Because wheat flour, it binds, it coats, it does so many things in baking. And taking it out of the food is challenging, and trying to replace it with rice flour or bean flour is just, it's not apples and oranges. Or it is apples and oranges, it's not apples and apples. So that's our dough. Does anybody have any questions on the dough, the bread dough? You can use this for easy little focaccias. You can actually turn this dough into a pan, sort of the size I had, like a jelly roll pan. You could put it onto a pizza stone, dimple it with your fingers, crumble over some fresh herbs, Parmesan cheese, drizzle it with olive oil, and bake it in a hot 400-degree oven, to serve alongside the soup. So there's a lot of things you can do with this dough. We also took this dough in rounds and wound it around hot dogs. And then you've got like a pigs in blanket. Great fun for kids who happen to be gluten-free, that want to, you got gluten-free hot dogs, and you've got the dough that goes with it. Serve it with the big bowls of mustard. It's fun for a party, and ketchup, something different. So the rolls, we form them into rounds. We let them rise. By the recipe says let them rise for about 15 minutes. They go in a hot oven. So does anybody have any questions so far? Yes? Yes, it is true with cakes. I did find that in the first book. It is true. And you don't have that where, in cakes, normally cakes that used regular wheat flour, you don't want to overbeat because they get tough and you'll develop tunnels in them. So yes, it is true. Not to the extent of the bread, because you have other things going on in cakes. When you make cakes, you've got more eggs, you've got sugar, you've got and eggs and sugar, and you've got some kind of fat. And those are all tenderizers. The challenge in baking gluten-free cakes is texture and then getting them to rise. And texture, most gluten-free cakes are based on rice flour, and rice flour is gritty in texture. I don't know how we figured this out, trial and error. But after being unhappy with all the gluten-free cakes I had baked for the first book, we made an orange cake. And we used orange juice as the liquid. And that cake was the most tender of all, and it wasn't gritty. And then it was sort of like, wait a minute, it was the acid. And then when we were unhappy with the biscuits on this book, Martha, who tests with me, said, what if we just use yogurt in there, or buttermilk instead? And that's where we just threw all of the suggestions from the manufacturers out the window, and it was the acid. And if you bake with rice flour and you use an acidic ingredient like buttermilk, yogurt, orange juice, it really improves the texture a lot. And then the other way to improve texture in cakes and to get more volume is to use an extra egg. Because when you're not baking cakes with wheat flour that has gluten in it, rice flour is just sort of wimpy, it doesn't have anything going for it. So how do you improve it? You add another egg, you get more volume, and you improve the protein structure. So, yeah. Well, for me, beating some of my easy cakes, I normally beat them 2 minutes and I'm done. So I think it's more like 2 to 3 minutes for a cake. On this dough, it was 3 minutes, but this was with a pretty substantial mixer. So I think you'll know by looking at it, watching it pull together. When a dough like this is ready, it's starting to leave the sides of the pan. It doesn't cling to the beaters, the paddle. It's amazing. It does raise in about 15. You can do longer. No. You go ahead and portion it out. Yeah. That's a faster way to get it to rise, too. You're welcome. Anybody else? Yeah. Uh-huh.
You said to use cream cheese? I've never heard of that.
Yeah. I hadn't either. Well, let's get out my book. Let's see. I want to think it's I'll give you the recipe. I want you to buy the book, so I don't want to give out every recipe. It's cream cheese and butter. I have to say, gluten-free cooking is not without fat. It is, and I talked to one of you all earlier, I think it was, about that's such a challenge, because if you are put on a gluten-free diet, it is, you need to cook well. You need the eggs, and you need the butter, and you need to help the flavor. So you really have to know that going in, that you're going to really balance it and eat fresh fruits and vegetables and serve a salad with it and all of that. So I had to preface my pie crust recipe with that disclaimer. Yeah, it's all gluten-free. All gluten-free. My next one is not going to be gluten-free. I'm kind of ducking out of the gluten-free world, but because my regular cake people are all offended, they want me to come back. No, I'm just teasing. I really have learned so much. It's been wonderful. I never would have baked this way. And there's so much to be said for it. All right, here we go. It's 2 eggs, 3 tablespoons of cold water, a tablespoon of cider vinegar. See, there you go. There's the acid. There's the acid in here. I sound like an advertisement for Gluten-Free Pantry, but I really do like their pie crust mix. You like it? It's in the green box. I use 1 package of their Gluten-Free Pantry pie crust mix, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 10 tablespoons. This makes 3 crusts. 3 crusts. 10 tablespoons of butter. That's just a stick and a 1/4, and 6 ounces of cream cheese. You can layer them in with a meat sauce, and then you've got your cheese, and you don't get all this exuding starch coming out of that lasagna noodle when you're cooking. And as a result, you get a really nicely balanced lasagna that's very saucy. It's very Italian. So I think that's totally changed the way I cook. I don't even buy wheat lasagna anymore. So it's kind of fun. Well, the rolls are they're a little overcooked. They're a little overcooked. I'm sorry. But you get the brownies. You get the brownies. Well, sorry about the rolls. So y'all are going to all have to come to Tennessee. And I owe you rolls. Sorry, that's my fault. I didn't. As I said, this is the first time I've demoed this in front of people. So it's not bad. It's just, are you serious? Are you serious? Okay. If you will open them up like this, and then, is this okay? Can we brush them with a little melted butter? Okay. Just a little, open them up, they're warm, a little melted butter, and kind of get that sort of pizza sort of experience thing. That's what we need, actually. Throw a little Parmesan and garlic on there. I think that would be good to go. But I think that'll be easier to eat if they're sort of open. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. These needed the gluten-free pantry flour or King Arthur, where the main ingredient is rice flour, number 1. Number 2, I should have told the pastry chef that specifically to use that type of flour. That's my fault. Number 3, commercial ovens bake at a higher heat than our ovens at home. And I should have watched those. I should have checked them at about. The rule of thumb is if it's 400, it's 25 degrees lower and 25% less cooking time. So if my recipe baked at 400 for 12 to 14 minutes, this needed to bake at 375 for a quarter less of the time. Math majors, where are you? 8 to 10. There you go. All right, so now while they're preparing your rolls, we'll move on to a totally foolproof recipe called Saucepan Brownies. And I say that because these are one of the recipes in the book that I would call creatively gluten-free. You know, it's a no-brainer, really. Cocoa, unsweetened cocoa. As much as the earlier speaker had terrible things to say about it, I love it. I love cocoa. I love chocolate, and I love to cook with it. But you know, you have to be careful in baking with cocoa in a scratch way because it is a flour. It's very drying. You can dry too much cocoa in a cake and cookie. You can really dry it out. Saying that, this is the perfect way to use cocoa. Let it be the flour in the brownie. And I put in a little bit of cornstarch. So, and then what you get is a lot of flavor come through. Many recipes in the book, well, it's a good number, are what I would call naturally gluten-free. It just was a way of drawing attention to recipes that you might have overlooked. A lot of recipes with rice. Also, treating a recipe in a gluten-free way, getting the flour out of it, like the stews and the soups. I mentioned that this morning. You don't ever need to dredge. You don't ever need to thicken soup or stew with flour. The only recipe I think that's really critical to do so would be in a gumbo where you want to make a roux. And then maybe in my mother's pot roast recipe where we dredge a chuck roast in seasoned flour and it cooks for 3 hours, slow oven with onions. There's no liquid. You know, any soup or stew that is not thick enough, you simply take the top off the pot and let it continue to cook down, and you can control how thick it is. Not in the stew, but in, say, a cream of tomato soup with basil, do as the French do and add a little bit of cream at the very end of the recipe. Works well in potato soups, tomato soups, like a quarter cup. Another way is to add ingredients, starchy things to it at the end, like finely diced potatoes. Think of potato. A potato is a natural thickener. Sweet potatoes and white potatoes, peeled, finely chopped, so that they don't take 20 minutes to cook. They may take 5 minutes, but all that starch goes into your beef stew and it thickens it naturally. Or a can of white beans, drained, rinsed, and thrown in at the end. We do that with lamb stew. So you don't need to, you can still sear the meat to get your caramelization there, but you just don't have the flour. So natural, I use a lot of cooking techniques in this book to make things gluten-free, to get the flour out of recipes, and then rely on naturally gluten-free ingredients like rice. This little guy here has more hidden gluten in him than any utensil in the kitchen. I did not know this, but if you've got a child or you're cooking dinner for somebody who's gluten-free and you think you've just done it all, don't use a wooden spoon. Don't use a wooden spoon because the flour gets trapped in here. Okay. All right, we've got 1 stick of melted butter. People say, do you like unsalted or salted butter? I usually say I use what I have. I do. I use what I have. Flavor-wise, I like a little salt in butter because, especially if I'm making something sweet, I think it balances the sugar. I always do that in frostings. If I'm going to make a frosting, I always use salted butter. And if I don't have it, I'll add a pinch of salt to the frosting. It just makes all the difference. You need to try it. I can go, I'll get a cupcake or something from some shop, and I'll taste it, and the frosting tastes just greasy to me. All I taste is just, and it needs salt. It just needs that little bit of salt to pick it up, I think. All right, so 1 stick of butter, and then I'm going to add cocoa to that, about a 1/4 cup. Use any cocoa you've got. Of course, the better cocoa, the better the brownie. But really, I mean, day-to-day baking, I'll use Hershey's. I just keep Hershey's. I like Hershey's to make chocolate frostings because it's lighter in color. It's really warmer in color. And if you're going to make a really dark chocolate cake, I think it's really pretty to put a sort of a lighter, a paler chocolate frosting on it. The really good Dutch cocoas tend to be darker. I think they have great flavor. They would be very good in this brownie. But I don't like them so much in frostings because if you overbeat the frosting that's got Dutch cocoa in it, it sort of looks gray. It's weird. It's sort of a brownish gray. I don't like it. But I can get picky about anything. And when you just kind of want to cook it until it sort of starts to thicken because this is our thickening. And then I'm going to add some sugar, about a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar and a 1/2 cup of just granulated white sugar. And then what else we got? We got vanilla, we got a little bit of salt. Teaspoon of vanilla, 2 eggs. Oh, you can just, yeah, we'll just throw it in there. That's all right. Yeah. That's okay. So about a teaspoon of vanilla. If you like almond extract, you could use almond. If you like Kahlua, you could use Kahlua. I'm pretty sure Kahlua is gluten-free. I think most of the liqueurs are gluten-free. Little brandy around the holidays. Be good. Little is our Kentucky chefs here. We could put bourbon in. That's right. And then 2 eggs. I'm going to turn it off. I use large eggs. Believe it or not, if you use extra large eggs, it'll kind of throw off your recipes. They're heavier. So when you bake and you're following a recipe, in my recipes, I use large eggs, not the extra large. And then we're going to add our other thickener, which is the 1/4 cup of cornstarch and a little bit of salt. Thank you. A little okay. And then we're just going to mix this in. I never really grew up using much cornstarch. I think I remember my mother always complaining about cornstarch, like if you added it in the wrong way to the gravy, it would get lumpy. I think she must have had some really bad experiences with cornstarch in her early years because we never had it in the kitchen. So I was kind of worried about using it. But you know, the world has really changed and it's not really a gravy kind of world. I mean, I think our benchmarks are different these days, whereas when my mother started cooking, knowing how to make a gravy without lumps was very important. And you know what? The little things are lumping on me, and I will show you what to do. It's never been an issue, but of course it is today because everything else has gone wrong. I remember in my early years of the cake mix doctor, I had not figured out when you made a cream cheese frosting that the cream cheese really needed to be room temperature, and so did the butter. And if you add eggs straight from the fridge, they're going to cool down your cream cheese and it's going to get lumpy. Not eggs, but milk. It would cool down the cream cheese. And I remember one time I called Southern Living Magazine, the food editor, and I said, okay, give me the secret. How do you get lumps out of a cream cheese frosting? And she said, beat the heck out of it. So I'm beating the heck out of it. So there you go, no lumps. Do that with your gravies, anything. Just get the whisk out, find the biggest arm in the house, the big macho arm, and let them beat the heck out of it. 1/2 cup of chocolate chips, that's it. Easy recipe. Anybody can make it. Change up the chips. Use milk chocolate chips. Use mini chips. Use mint chocolate chips, anything you want to do. Add a little peppermint extract to this around Christmas. It'd be really nice, or the holidays, whatever you like. And that's it. This goes into a buttered and, rice flour dusted or cocoa dusted. You can use cocoa to dust a pan with for about 25 minutes at 350. I really recommend you making these, and if you have time, to put them in the freezer or fridge, because they firm up. They're real easy to slice, and plus I think they're really delicious when they're a little bit cold. I know that sounds strange, but they're really lovely, and you don't miss the flour. You really don't. All right. Well, I think it's hard work to be on a gluten-free diet, but obviously it's easier with the ingredients. The ingredients today. All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Yep.
This program is brought to you by Miami Culinary Institute at Miami-Dade College. For more information about the schools and the Culinarium program, please visit www.miamidadeculinary.com or call 305-237-3276.